Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Restart from Teetotum Game Studios. Restart is a thematic time-traveling game for 1 to 4 players with worker placement, set collection, roll and write, rolling dice, a whole bunch of mechanics all mixed into one. We'll explain a bit more shortly. But first, before I do, please note, this is a prototype, all rules and components of the exchange, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But with that said, Restart is a modular system, which is why it has so many keywords and mechanics baked in, because you have the central grid of what the game is doing, and then you have the individual plug and play components, which will give you different things that you can do. And so to that end, I'm going to focus first on the general idea of what the game is doing, and then I'll talk through briefly what the other modules are doing as you play. But the core idea is going to be this central grid, and the fact that you're trying to make patterns on that central grid matching your chain cards over here. So for example, this is a chain card. This player, whoever has this card, in this case me, is going to want to have a yellow, purple, and no, you cannot rotate or adjust. It's going to be in that orientation on this grid. So I can either try to go ahead and get 2 purples here, and that's probably the best. Alternatively, I can try to put a purple here and a yellow here. That might have that option because I already have certain cards on the grid. But effectively, you're trying to cash in these chain cards by making patterns on the grid in order to score points in the game, which will also get you fragments, and those fragments will slot into your player board to go ahead and upgrade your tableau. That sounds like a lot, but the basic idea, the main thing you want to hold on to there, is you want to get cards into the grid that match the patterns on your chain cards. And as you cash in chain cards, you'll be able to go ahead and gather more chain cards, rinse and repeat until you end the round, play that for 3 rounds, and that's basically the game. Granted, if you don't have a full idea of how to play, that makes sense because I haven't gotten into the rest of it yet. And I should note, this will not be a full rules overview, but I will be trying to give you a general sense of how it plays. So you're trying to get these chain cards in play. It's one of the main things you're trying to focus on. To that end, the game is going to give you 4 phases, and that's all listed on your player board: 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these player boards are nice and chunky, have a lot of mechanics, have different things mixed in and out for the different modules you'll be playing with. But effectively, you have 4 phases over here. Phase 1 is playing a card down into your player board itself, so you can take a card from your hand and play it into the matching zone. Let's go ahead and add a card to zone 1 because we don't yet have a card there, and we're going to pay 2 time tokens because that's the cost on the bottom of the card over there. Pay those into the supply, boom, we got a new card out. Now you can layer more cards out. That'll be helpful because it'll get you more points, but that's the main thing that's going to get you by placing out duplicate cards. So right now, we place a card into our player board. We now have all 3 abilities active, and those abilities are going to be more relevant as we gather fragments and place them in powering up. You can see on the side of each card there's certain actions and benefits. You can be getting points, bonus actions, things like that as you play fragments into the sideboard over there. So you're trying to think through what bonus actions you're going to want, what points you're going to want, and how you're building up those tracks as you go through phase 1, which is again simply playing a card into your board itself. Then you get to the next phase. We have a few core actions over here, and there are ways to unlock extra actions or secondary actions as you go through these, but for right now it's focusing on the core actions. You can go ahead and move your adult time travel over here. Each player is going to have a child and an adult. The child is going to go through the rounds of the game, so round 1, 2, and 3, the age of the game, and your adult is going to jump around, giving you more flexibility of where you can place cards onto the grid. So your adult worker has more flexibility, your child worker is just traveling through time. This has that time traveler aspect, the future is dystopian, things are falling apart, we're jumping to the past to try to solve the various problems that have led us to where we are. That is mostly a pasted on theme. The actual way that works with the game is going to be minimal. So for example, your adult time traveler can never be on the space with your child because that would cause a paradox and rift in time and all that. But again, past that, it's mostly a thematic overlay to the game. So right now, we can go ahead and we can place our adult worker into any of these zones over here, and we can go ahead and play a card from our hand of cards into that spot in order to go ahead and activate the action on that card. Now you're getting 2 things out of this. You're getting the action on the card, which can be very helpful, gaining 3 adrenaline pills, that can be very helpful, but you're also laying the cards into the grid in order to go ahead and meet these chains that you're trying to match over here. So you're thinking of the patterns and the abilities that the cards have, and if you focus on it so far, you realize that right now, cards can be placed into your grid to go ahead and benefit from the side actions. They can be placed into the grid in order to benefit from the core action, and they can be placed into the grid in order to give you pattern matching. So you're trying to be mindful of a lot of things that the cards are doing as you play. When you're done with that phase over here, and then you can cash in chain cards. That's another thing you can do. You can go ahead and cash in your chain cards, paying time tokens to go ahead and cash them in. There are 3 levels of chain cards, each giving you more points, but also more difficult to cash in. When you're done with that round, you move to phase 3. Phase 3 is going to be the modular area of the game, meaning phase 1, 2, and 4 are the same game to game. Phase 3 is where you plug and play different modules. In this case, I have the basic module set up over here. This is going to have you rolling dice to advance on 2 different tracks in order to get as many points as possible. And so right now, you're going to choose an action. When in this case, it's action A or B. Well, it's always action A or B, just what action A and B are depend. And right now, action A is going to be moving up the cure track versus the virus track. So right now, or I may have those reversed, but right now, for example, let's say we want to go ahead and move up this track over here. We would roll our dice and we'd see, what do we get? We got these, okay, it's not the best. I kind of want to get the double, but it's not going to help me right now. Right now, we're going to go ahead and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to move up on the track because right now we only have 2 of the sun and these are going to count against them. So effectively, these are going to be helpful. They're giving us +2, but these are giving us -4, which means we won't move up the track. Now, I could go ahead and advance on this to give me protection against these and not count them, but that will cost me negative points at the end of the game, so you want to be very mindful about using this protection over here. But maybe in this case, because I have so many negatives, it's worth it, and I'll go ahead and move 2 further up the track over here. Well, wrong player over there. I'll move 2 further up the track with that purple token over there. So again, that's the core idea over here. You're going to be rolling dice in order to move the tracks. You can move up this track, which is going to have you counting the yellows, or this track, which will have you counting the greens. But in both sides, you have this over here, which is going to help you count as 2 of either track, but you have to be able to have benefited from this track over here to activate that. What that means, that might have been a little confusing, what that means is each of these 3 tracks, whenever you upgrade your, whenever you go ahead and place these down into the board, which again you'll get from these, whenever you place them down, you're both unlocking benefits along the side, but you're also giving benefits to that module that you plug and play, giving you more flexibility. And so for example, in this particular module, the leftmost track over here is going to let you lock dice before you roll them, giving you guaranteed results. The rightmost module is going to give you rerolls, so you can go ahead and gain rerolls out of things not working for you. And the center module lets you count those wilds over here. These wilds, which count as 2 for whichever track you're going on, you can only cash them in if you actually have progress. So for each shard you have on the center track, you can go ahead and benefit from those. So trying to be focusing on your chains in order to grow your module, to grow your flexibility in whatever module you're dealing with, is going to be key to getting as many points as possible out of that module. And in this case, you're going to be getting points for both how far you've gotten, as well as leader points, but possibly losing points for using the protection abilities over here. So again, phase 3 is going to be the module. In this case, the module is one of 2 actions to advance on one of 2 tracks. It's probably the most straightforward module, although frankly, all the modules are fairly straightforward. And then gets us to action 4, or phase 4. Phase 4 is going to be basically getting extra cards back. You get extra cards or time tokens back, and you can, throughout the game, there are times where you can skip doing things in order to gain more things. And for example, if you skip advancing in this module, you can go ahead and gain double time tokens and double cards, which sometimes is necessary to keep your engine going, and so you're trying to juggle with that. But that's kind of the core thing that you're doing over here. So just again, a quick recap over here of what you're trying to do, assuming you're using this module over here. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be going through a sequence of phases where you're effectively trying to first build out your core grid over here to be able to gain benefits or points, or also build towards these modules. But then you're going to go ahead and be moving people down around on this grid in order to play cards, benefit from the cards' instant actions, but then also to create patterns where you can cash in your chain cards and then gather new chain cards, which will also give you these shards you can place into your board to go ahead and increase your tableau building. That tableau building is going to help you in general because of the cards you've laid out, but also for whatever module you're playing, in this case giving us the ability to lock dice, re-roll dice, or benefit from the wilds as we try to advance as far as possible on this track, gaining as many points as possible. And then in step 4, you're basically replenishing a few resources. That's the core idea of what you're doing here. And now you're going through that across 3 rounds of play. 3 rounds is not 3 turns. Turns are going to go until you basically go through a certain number of these chain cards. At that point, you'll go to the next round and rinse and repeat for 3 rounds. And that's basically how you play through Restart. Now, there's a few things we didn't really touch upon. The first thing is going to be you're going to have asymmetric player abilities. So right now I'm playing with the Sailor, where I can use void tokens from the supply, which is another thing we haven't covered yet, which is void tokens, which can be placed onto the grid to make things wild. So for example, you can go ahead and place a void token here, and cash in these cards over here, because now you have those treated as wilds for the sake of your chain cards. But these will leave the grid at the end of the turn. You're also going to have these gadget cards over here. Each of the modules are going to have their own gadget cards that help you in terms of some abilities or either an ability related to the module or possibly endgame scoring, but these gadget cards you'll be getting at the beginning of the game, paying various tokens for them, and then slotting them down into your player boards where they fit nicely into your player boards at the very bottom over there. But you can gather gadget cards, which again will be some degree of player asymmetry as far as how you interact with the module, and you'll do a pre-game draft for those. And then lastly, there's the modules themselves. The first module is going to be this one over here, which will have you, like I said, mostly rolling dice. On the other side of this, you're going to have a bit of a passing bills and laws as you vie to get into the center and to get those various tokens. You'll also have a roll and write module where this one's, well, not roll and write, but so much, I guess just, it's got no rolling, but writing. It's got writing. You got writing in this module, where depending on where your characters are on the main grid, you're going to be drawing different symbols into these tokens over here to be able to get as many points as possible, building up a variety of things based on whether there's industry present or which tokens you have or full columns, basically getting points for a variety of tokens you filled out there. And then lastly, we're going to have our set collection module where you're going to be trying to gather sets of these different chromosomes in order to get either runs or matching sets and trying to get as many points as possible through those. And again, in all cases, you'll have your player dashboards. This one over here is double-sided, but there is another one as well for the other two modules. So you're going to have these player dashboards that all give you three different ways to build up your tableau in order to prepare you for those modules and give you more mitigation or more abilities around what you are able to get done with each of the modules. So that's kind of the basic idea of how this game plays out. The last thing I should note is this grid is set up for a 2-player game. In a 3 or 4-player game, you'd have a full additional column. That's why this over here is a 4 over here, because you'd lose this in a 2-player game and use these 2-player and the rest for the full 3 to 4-player count. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into my review of what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is to begin with are these chunky little player boards over here. These are very cool and premium. I don't know if you can get a good sense from it from this video alone, but there's like 17 layers going on over here. They feel like they are a work of art, and they're a nice starting point to the game, but more importantly, they also carry essential information about what you're doing and or what your various modules are going to be doing, and so they do have a good degree of information going on over here. Plus, they have player aids as well, which giving you even more information on the various cards, especially related to the modules you're playing as. But more importantly, as far as the game itself, because these are all just nice extras on top of it, the tableau building of the modules is satisfying. Going ahead and gathering shards or fragments, placing them down into your board in order to unlock the abilities on your cards, but also to get stronger and stronger in the modules, that is a satisfying twist to the game as far, not really twist, a satisfying engine building to the game that you are going to get more powerful. When you start off in these modules, you don't feel like you can really do a lot in them, but as you build things up, you can either have a lot more mitigation or just a lot more that you can do. And so that tableau building combined with the dual tableau building, because you're placing cards there, and the cards you place are coming from a giant deck full of cards, so there's a lot you can do as far as placing things down in your grid, which just gives you a lot of flexibility. And the multi-use cards is going to be a big part of it, because every card you're being mindful of how it fits into your grid, how it's going to give you an ability when you place it, and where it's going to go in order to create these chains. So the game's giving you a lot of things to think about with every single card you gather. Then there's the gadget cards, which I like as well. These gadget cards, each module having their own gadgets, giving you more abilities or tweaks to the system, which again is just overall having more abilities going on. This entire game so far is tableau building and abilities and multi-use cards and pre-drafted in-game asymmetry from the gadget cards. So there's just a lot of things going on in terms of how you're going to be trying to approach your core engine, which is this pattern laying effect, pattern building, and trying to go ahead and get those fragments into your board in order to go ahead and prep for the module. You just have a lot of things as far as the way you can try to tackle that engine while all players are working with the same general sense. You do have your asymmetric character, so there's a slight difference going on, but you're starting off very much with a limited amount of what you're actually able to do, but then the sheer amount of things you're doing with your cards are going to grow the players in drastically different directions while giving them either abilities, tableau building, mitigation, or all three as you approach it. And so the last thing I'd say is the game gives you a strong modular approach in general because of the fact that you're playing a core game, but then you can mix and match different modules, which will shift up what you're trying to do. They don't drastically shift up the game because they are, we'll get more into this in the things that I don't like, but the modules themselves are not super complicated, but they do give you more things you're trying to figure out as you try one module versus the next, learn the rules, and then most importantly, figuring out where you want your fragments to go in order to work towards your core cards, but also the modules and where you think you need that extra boost. So the game just gives you a lot, both in terms of the general variety as well as the modular variety, to be able to give you so many things to consider or think about as you try to figure out how you're going to win the game. In terms of things I don't like, first of all, the theme of the game was very much a letdown for me. And I'm not playing games for themes, don't get me wrong. I play games primarily for mechanics. A theme to me is a nice extra. But I would say I kind of walked into Restart being a bit more excited about the elements of the past, the future, interacting with your past self, and all these concepts that the game kind of sold me on in the initial pitch, but then when I sit down to actually play it, it's very much a pasted-on theme. The only real interaction of the past and present theme, from what I can see, is the idea that you can't go to the same space as your child character, so there's a bit of kind of getting each other's way, but outside of that, I don't think that I strongly felt the theme. We're playing a bunch of cards. They have things: coal mine, psychology stabilizer, mass media, vaccination, social networks. It's just a bunch of technology cards. You could have listed any other theme thrown it onto here, and I wouldn't have felt that strong a difference over here. So the entire theme is not bad. It just, I think I wanted the theme to be felt more in the game, and I didn't feel the theme in the game, so for me it was a letdown in that sense. But then far more importantly, because that I can get over, that was just expectations and expectations not being met, more importantly, I would say that the modules themselves feel very abstractly thrown in. The modules don't have a lot of depth to them. While the rolling dice is probably the most simplistic of them, for the most part, it's just a degree of set collection. Well, you're going to have set collection in the chromosome modules. You're going to have a minor degree of roll and write going on here. This may have been my favorite module, partially because this is the only one that seems to actually interact with what's going on outside the module itself. So you have this board over here, and so where things are there, and players who are on a certain space, if you use a player's piece to be able to go ahead and draw on this board, they're going to get an advancement as well in the track, so they're going to get points from it. So there's a little bit more of an element as far as trying to be mindful of what players are going for here, but really for the most part, the modules all felt like a very, very light mechanic thrown together, and then some degree of how you're going to build and give that player's flexibility around the mechanic, and so they did manage to take those and build them out a bit because you have to have the tableau building element going on, but all the modules on their own, none of them felt immensely satisfying. They all felt very plug and play, very basic, and you have to learn an entire new rule set around each one. An entire new rule set might be a bit of a stretch. It's like a page and a half, but you have to learn that page and a half of the rules for a module, and I can't say any of them felt particularly compelling. The most compelling part of the game for me was going to be the multi-use cards and how you're trying to handle all of that, because every card can go here, can go into the grid, and then also has an ability on it. And so you're really thinking through a lot of how to manage your cards, and very often cards will even reference things in your hand, like, oh, if you play this card, then if you have these cards in your hand, you'll get an extra thing. And so you're really trying to juggle a lot in terms of the card management, and that gives you a lot to consider. But then the modules themselves kind of felt very basic as far as what you're trying to do. I didn't feel that same level of depth, and so I think the area of the game that's plug and play, the area of the game that gives you the biggest variety, felt the most simplistic, which definitely was a step down for me. I'll also say the fact that you can be building towards these chain cards and have other players mess up your grid, that's definitely not something I ever enjoy. Whenever you're pattern building and other players can easily get in the way, but more importantly, when they can easily get in the way without knowing they're getting in the way, I don't enjoy that mechanic in general. The idea that I'm sitting there trying to think about what you're going for and trying to stop you, I'm fine with that. That's tactical play, I enjoy that. But the idea that I'll sit there on my turn, do something for me, and it messes up what you did on your turn, but then on the reverse, when it comes down to your turn, or however vice versa that, the other player doesn't, the fact that we just randomly get in each other's way as we're trying to do our own thing, I don't like that, because it kind of just rewards randomness. It rewards luck. You can work towards your thing and I won't stop you because I didn't need to. But then now I'm working towards my thing, you will stop me, not because you were intentionally trying to, but just luck of the draw. You didn't even know what my patterns looked like, and you didn't even know what you were doing, but it got in my way. So building out patterns on the central grid and having other players get in the way of them, definitely not a mechanic I enjoy in any game, in addition to this one over here. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, there's going to be the low interaction in the game. I know I just talked about how players will get in each other's way, but that's not interaction. Incidentally getting in each other's way in the game, but then the rest of the time not caring at all what players do, that's not, I don't consider that strong interaction. Now, I don't mind low interaction games. That's not so much of an issue. I will say downtime can be a thing. The game recommends you start playing this as a two-player game, and I get why, because as you start escalating in the game, there's going to be more and more to consider, and your turns can drag out, and that low interaction definitely makes it less satisfying if you're playing at a larger player count. So you want to be mindful of that. I don't mind low interaction, but I definitely would want to play this at 2 or 3 players, probably not 4. And then additionally, I'll say that there's information overload. I appreciate that aspect. I appreciate how much is going on in the cards and what I'm trying to do, but when you're looking at a full hand of cards, you're trying to think through each of those cards and how they can all be utilized for your engine and how much is going to change round to round, there's just a lot to think about in the game, and at least until you have a better sense of how things work, until you can at a glance look at all the benefits and the abilities and all the stuff that's happening, it definitely will be information information overload for sure for your first game. And then lastly, it's worth noting that the rules in the game were not great. Now again, this is a prototype. I assume those things will be cleaned up, but in case they aren't, I always have to mention that just in case, that the rules I went through, I thought that they were short and accessible, but also the shortness left a lot that was harder to clarify, and I had to try to hunt down information, try to figure out how some things worked, or in some cases even just make assumptions. Definitely not the best rulebook as it is. Hopefully in the final game that will not be an issue. As far as final thoughts on Restart, this is a tricky one for me. This is a tricky one because there are so many, how to put this, there are aspects of this game that I really thoroughly enjoy. And there are aspects of this game that left me thoroughly unimpressed. But the game comes as a full package, and so how do you actually engage with that? For me, I'd say that the modules felt not that satisfying, and also you have to learn new rules for each one, and they didn't feel like they added, again, that much decision space to the game. For the sake of variety, sure, it's nice to have extra ones or different ones so you can try to think through what you're going to do, but it kind of reminds me a lot of Merchant's Cove, which we'll talk about, I guess, during the recommendations, but it reminds me a lot of Merchant's Cove, where to me, the most exciting thing about each module was the attempt to explore a new module and see what I'm doing. But my desire to replay a module, that's not there. I enjoy trying to jump to a new module and being like, ooh, what am I trying to do now? Ooh, how am I going to build up my fragments over here and build my little tableau? That part I liked. But I have no desire to revisit a module because they were, for the most part, fairly simplistic, where the most interesting thing was exploring them for the first time. But then the rest of the game is very satisfying. The rest of the game, which is the part that sticks around every single time, the card play and the multi-use cards and how much you're trying to juggle there, that was a far more compelling aspect of the puzzle, but again, held back a bit because I didn't appreciate the chaining aspect and the way other players get in the way of your chains incidentally. And so for me, this is a hard one because there's a lot of good, but also a lot of not as much wrapped into a full puzzle here. For me, rating-wise, as far as final thoughts, I'm gonna come out this one. I'm gonna rate this one as a 3 out of 5. For me, the end game of it did not leave me as satisfied as I would like. I think there are many aspects that I did definitely enjoy a lot, and there were a lot of elements that I'm very, not necessarily impressed might be the wrong word, but I found very satisfying. But I have to look at this as a full package, and as a full package, between the modules being a little satisfying and between the other players getting in the way of your chains incidentally, those are two things that definitely held back the experience for me. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you want a game that's going to have a lot of modular plug and play in a way that, again, I think the most interesting part is the exploration of the modules as opposed to how satisfying they can be, definitely check out Merchant's Cove, because it has that aspect where each player takes on an asymmetric character and then approaches a same core puzzle, different ways that they plug and play things, meaning either the game or the players, but nonetheless a similar experience. And if you're looking for a game that has time travel in what I thought was a more intriguing, compelling way, check out That Time You Killed Me, a 2-player strategic game in which players are kind of managing the flow of time, as well as different modules too. That one also has modular play, while you try to navigate a tactical abstract game together with time travel. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.